I'm your host, New Fatora, and this is the podcast where I discuss the best stories with the best minds in the community. On this episode, I'll be discussing the Arena text game overseen by Pony Pony X9, one of the most interactive pieces of content I've seen and participated in. With me, I have Hans Gutherson. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me back on, my friend.
Of course, you're always welcome. So, the Arena was first opened, so to speak, on March 30th, 2016. And
Mm.
it was something that I was part of. And it was a lot of fun. And I'm curious why you didn't join in.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I was mostly waiting to see where it was going to go. Um, I think I remember Pony X9, a friend of mine, looking for 5 or 6 people. And when people quickly jumped in, I was like, all right, I'll see where this goes from here and if there's some opportunity for me to join in. Obviously, project like this, as you know, being part of it, is a lot of work, and
Yeah.
there were so many elements to it that was a bit hard to juggle. You would think, in terms of like a character's physical fatigue was measured in percentage, and their wedgie fatigue, and all these other
Yeah.
details, like everything you would expect from like a fight, was basically there, and keeping track of who's winning and who's not, detailed scoreboards, and at the same time writing stories that, if you're the writer, balancing like the two fighters having being looking cool,
Yeah.
so, and it's hard because you're
And
not just writing like when Arc Time did his tournament, and people were free to write stories for that, and I did, and I had like a Star Wars character, I think it was, or like Princess Peach, I think. Like some of those fanfic characters, like there you
right.
can sort of do whatever, and sure, the fans might get upset if their character they like doesn't win, but here it's like someone has made a character for you to write. If you have them suck, that person's probably gonna be upset, and they're gonna be
Yeah.
there reading the story, and they'll be like, "Well, my character wasn't like that. I didn't picture him like that."
Yeah, that's
So there's a lot to try and juggle and do justice to. I know I was definitely looking at it and keeping a close eye on it. I think at a certain point, for me, it was a lot to sort of keep track of,
yeah.
in terms of like fatigue levels, and be like, do I need to like know exactly who's at what level of fatigue, and who spent what on what kind of outfit, because you had gold, a whole system of
Yup.
currency in the game. So it was a lot, but
Yeah.
I was certainly very interested in it. And then when it sort of uh just tapered off, as interactivity on Lucky Fish forums does, or as it generally almost always does in the community, unless it's one writer doing one-off thing on their own, like writing.com, for example, known for its interactive stories that people can continue. Those are mostly left unfinished with a bunch of paths that are started. So yeah, it's too bad that this one, after what seemed like a ton of work, like trying to get you invested in like the several characters who were all kind of the same in some ways. They're all kind
Yeah.
of slender and
Yeah.
athletic tone characters,
Yeah.
But I mean, you had stats, but, and it's interesting how the stats develop too. I mean, I guess the point I'm trying to make is it was just so much. As an
Yeah.
observer, it was a ton to take in, and looking back at it, like 6 years, 7 years later, um, it's a lot to go through and be like, wow, this was a very ambitious project.
Absolutely.
Today, I would love for sure to get involved in some way, either creating a character to send in. I feel like at that time I was probably just too nervous. Like, oh, like I had done some of those community story ones. I was probably like, I also want to give somebody else a chance, to get in, especially seeing people like we never hear of, not traditional writers, creating characters, right? Like some of these people who aren't super frequently posting on the board, to give them a shot to
Yeah.
get involved and engaged. it was that too.
Huh.
So a lot of factors and why I wasn't like the first one in there. Like take
Yeah,
my character. But certainly it's a really cool experiment. I'm excited we get to
absolutely.
chat about it.
Yeah, and with the stories, like what you got to keep in mind, like Pony was writing all the characters that none of them were his.
Yeah,
They were all like,
exactly.
and he was doing them extremely well.
Yeah, yeah, he was. He's a great writer.
Yeah.
Also on DeviantArt, it's 48 Carat. You can
Hmm.
find some of his stories there. Really talented writer. We got to show him some love, thankfully, in recent episodes, but he's super underrated. One of the most
Yeah.
underrated, unknown writers in the
Yeah.
community. Still active, like still around on DA. I was in touch with him recently about the heist and how they're not like they're still around and they're hopefully we hope write some more in the future.
Yeah. I. It seems like this could translate extremely well into like a D&D module.
What do you mean by that? What are you thinking when you say that?
It feels with all the different stats and like the fighting that happens at scheduled times and all these different actions you can take, potentially a world out there to explore beyond the arena. Um, I feel like it could, like you could fight in between quarters and things like that. Like there's all kinds of things you could
Mm,
do. So I feel like it would translate very well into something of that format.
interesting. Yeah, when you say that and you add those ideas, I could picture it, I think. Like you would have a module and you would make your character using the same stat system Pony X9 created, which
Right.
involves what the age and the height, basic stuff. But then um, giving them the stats and the very simplistic stat system of like you all have a 5, which it doesn't really mean much, and you could probably explain a bit more why it's a 5 to start or why it's not like a
Yeah.
0 and one of them's a 1, stuff like that. But certainly the point is, yeah, you can build out that system, and there's a lot of mechanics already
Yeah.
laid out for you, so you could absolutely adapt this and say, okay, instead of me Pony X9 writing all these stories, you now just get to role play it like in a
Yeah.
D&D game. Who's gonna fight first? Maybe the dungeon master, sorts that out and says, okay, you two are gonna fight. You have money to spend outside of your fights on like what your outfits look like and what you do outside of the fight can maybe prepare you better and increase your stats for the next fight.
Yeah, absolutely.
So very PvP kind of game. Maybe there's a way to make it so you're not just trying to like beat each other up all game and trying to meta game it so you're always just better in the fights against each other. Whereas like in this text game where it's one person writing it, you probably don't have to worry about that. But as a module, yeah, it's there's a lot here you can take, and then probably a lot you're gonna want to work out and figure out how it actually works
Right.
as a game you're playing in a group. But that's a really cool idea. I like that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It just feels like it would work.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of potential for that, and there's a little small history of modules people have made with wedgies in the
Yeah.
community. So it's not going to be the first time it's ever happened. So I think good precedent for trying something like that. Just
Definitely.
license it for Pony X9. Get in touch. Work on with them on building out a system, and then people can be RPing this together.
Yeah. Absolutely. Now, if this were to be played again today, which one of your characters would you put in? Or would you make up a new one for it?
I'd probably make up a new one.
Really?
I mean, it's
Okay.
funny because like years ago, Shao Melder and I did a similar kind of arena story, just us RPing, where it was like two people they would fight in like a gladiatorial style combat with wedgies, and I created a character for that named Wisp. Who was like the exact opposite of Shao's character, who was a very brawny, strong, soldier-like character. and mine was, of course, as the name kind of hints at, very small and petite and all about dexterity, and had some, I think, assassin background, as I remember. So maybe something like that. I might maybe take her because no one knows her and she hasn't appeared in anything anyone's read beyond like that small secret RP. Um, or I would make someone new who sort of fits into this fantasy setting. I mean, the cool thing about the beginning of the arena is you sort of get a little feel for the fact that you're in this sort of gladiatorial setting and there's a fight. I mean, the kind of wild thing is it's so open
Yeah.
that like you could set it at any time period, and I
Hmm.
could say, "Oh yeah, well here's my kind of fantastical character," which is what a lot of the people who created characters for this, some of them anyway, some of them went for that. Some of them went for really real life people who were like they're in high school or university. But even just some of the names of some of them, like Sephria,
Yeah.
uh, almost like a. It's almost when they talk about running a training center. It's almost like are they a Pokemon character? So is what I think there. But it's also a fantasy kind of name. So I mean, the
Yeah.
fun thing about how open it is that the people, including yourself, who created characters for this for
Oh, I
Pony
didn't.
X9, right? You didn't? I thought you submitted a character.
Yeah, I did, but it was Jen from Fortunate Events.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm
That
saying. I'm saying the
she
thing is,
existed
it was
before.
so open. Yeah, no, totally. My point is, people were able to create or use their own characters from
Right.
across universes. The
Yeah.
openness of that allowed it. It's not like you need to have a fantasy character.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. So that was really cool. The fact that it could be fantasy-ish,
Absolutely.
maybe new characters. And it doesn't really matter. Like it's so ephemeral.
Yeah.
That was really cool. So yeah, for me, it would be interesting. I could just make like a typical cheerleader or something, and like have them dance around and fight, or it could be someone very fantasy assassin background who's gonna fight with wedgies.
Yeah.
I would definitely create somebody new though, I think, and see where how far they could get. Because I'd probably be too sad if like Daniela didn't win or something. I'd be like, oh, it's in canon now. She can't beat this person. Like,
Well,
nah, if some new character gets in it, it's all good if they lose.
well, it's an alternate timeline.
Sure, yeah. If she's in this arena, there's probably some kind of alternate timeline, that have to exist.
Yeah.
Depends how you are about that sort of stuff as a writer. If you're like, oh, I must explain how my character ended up here in this arena and
Right.
somehow figure that out. Or if you're just like, whatever, who
Well,
cares?
it could turn into something like Marvel's Secret Wars.
Sure, yeah, absolutely, yeah. Could just be your character falls through a pipe or something, ends up in this arena thing, or it was
Yeah.
all a dream, the lamest of all
Oh God,
answers.
yeah.
And it's like, oh, that doesn't actually matter that she won some wedgie fights against these characters who didn't. It was all a dream.
Yeah. I mean, at least it was a good dream.
Yeah, absolutely the best.
So yeah. So as we've sort of laid out already, it was pretty in depth for just
Hmm.
a thread-based forum website. So if you'd like to find out the comprehensive rules and mechanics, you check out the link in the description for the Lucky Fetish thread. But basically, how it worked was people submitted characters to play in the game, and then all the players would submit an action for each of the 6 phases of the day, which is quite a bit. I don't know if there needs to be that many, with multiple different actions that could be taken during each phase, like purchasing new underwear, exploring the 3 different areas provided, which are the fighters' quarters, the training room, and the titular arena, and spectate matches. And there's plenty more. They also had typical RPG stats, and you could also train to improve them temporarily or permanently. But I could never really pinpoint when a stat would temporarily or permanently increase. Um,
Hmm.
but there were also unique stats like physical and wedgie fatigue, as Hans mentioned, and confidence, humiliation, dominance, and submissiveness levels. I thought those were really creative, and I liked them quite a bit. Although it was, I guess, not enough time had passed in the game to be able to really figure out how much of an effect all of those had.
Yeah.
There were also 6 stages to each match that happened,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
those were approach, grip, wrestling, wedging, submission, and post-match show. And these overlapped at times, but you had to include what you would do in each scenario just in case. And that's just that's there's still quite a bit more to this game, like gold and all that, and there's ways to earn
Mm.
gold and all. There's all kinds of stuff. It's crazy. I don't know how. I
Yeah.
just don't know how he came up with all this stuff.
Yeah, he's got a very impressive imagination, and some of his other stories are a testament to that.
Yeah.
Like, what's the one I told you about? Interstellar? No, Star
Ghost Rider.
Strider, right? Star Strider's a fantastic story, and even in the few chapters we get of that, you can see a great depth of lore,
Yeah.
and it feels like a great successor to like Star Wars in how much like of a world is already created in like 3 or 4 short chapters. So
Hmm.
yeah, there's it's not a big surprise to me that they're able to quickly come up with some of these mechanics and dive deep into a lot of that.
Yeah,
It is a
definitely.
lot to juggle though, and I mean for a text game where you're also having to write these stories, and I mean the thing is too like if you're some of these people sending in your character and you're sending it because I you had to like send him like what you wanted your character to do right privately
Yeah.
and wait. I guess he'd have to
Hmm.
reply to all of you, and then you'd have to write all that out and like keep track of it all. I mean
Yup.
that's a lot of work.
Yes.
A lot of work. I mean, it would be a cool thing maybe if you had a Patreon or something and you were delivering content for this group and making something from it, but to just have to do it, for
Yeah.
nothing, it's really crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you'd have to. You'd be like a full time DM essentially.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
much prep work. But then I feel like if it was changed into a real game, you could change the matches from writing the story yourself to having uh, a turn-based combat,
Yeah.
and then the
Yeah.
players dictate what happens in the combat. That would take
Yeah,
a
I think
lot of the
that's a
work
good idea.
off.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, anything you could put on the people who are sending you copy. I mean, obviously he's has you do a lot of the work, obviously creating a character, giving you some ideas. But if you were to outsource that even more in some ways, like you mentioned, obviously if it's a module, then you have the players
Yeah.
doing everything pretty much and you're set. Like you just have to probably as a DM figure out who's gonna fight who when and stuff. But certainly, yeah, having the players maybe interact a bit more. I mean, it's cool to see like you were willing to write enough to get him started and send him updates, and you were engaged enough to do that, which I think is a great sign that even people who maybe aren't writers, who don't think they are, they're willing to put forth effort to keep something like this going.
Hmm.
And I don't know why it died out exactly. I don't know if he ever told you. It was like people weren't sending him stuff or it was just too much work. I wouldn't be surprised by sort of any of that. But it's certainly a lot. And if the people you're working with on this can do more of the work, that's probably going to help it be more sustainable, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I feel like you could even add like a little, um, whatever you'd call it, the like a drawing lots stage or something. I don't know where like you can see who's determined, like the matchups where the matchups are determined. I don't know, just something like that. Maybe even like I don't know. I mean, the last post on the thread is Pony saying people haven't sent in their plans. So I wonder
Yeah.
if that was the real cause of the game ending. And Pony was like, this is too much work. It's I'm people are taking too long.
Yeah. You know what's funny? I have old messages from Pony X9 that I'm finding, and he's asking me about the arena.
Mm.
So I'm wondering. if I've just not forgotten that I literally helped him write some of these fights.
Oh, you did.
And I have to search through my info and find if there's some reference to me or in the
Yeah.
post, to
Yeah,
something like
you
that.
did.
I did, and I totally forgot. I helped them write
Yes.
these. Oh, jeez, that's a
Some of them.
surprise. This is why I'm the special guest on here, because I helped him write some of these fights. Yeah, I was just like, it seemed familiar. Yeah, and he's looking through. He's giving me like info he had this back in end of April, beginning of May. We were going back and forth on what the battle segments would be like, and May 2nd, he's saying something about how he really likes something, and he say make a few edits to post it. So I'm gonna have to find what these all are, see how good
Yeah.
it was. Probably another page here, but that's a very funny. That's the thing, you forget when you're Hans. You've written way too much stuff.
Yeah. You had your fingers in too many baskets, or whatever the phrase is.
Yeah, exactly. But that's very fun when you get to remember. Oh yeah, I did help with this, so that's why I wasn't involved in making a character. I was too busy writing it. That's the answer. I forgot.
Well, I think it. You helped with the which one is it? The Serena and Liz fight.
Yeah, I just found the
Yes.
part where he says I helped write it. This would
Yeah.
have been the yeah, it looks like the May 3rd post he made. Serena versus Liz. I wrote most of that.
Nice.
Yeah, if not basically all of it. Wow.
Wow. Yeah. It was well done.
Yeah, so I got to flesh out those characters, and it's fun looking back at some of that and be like the little bit that you know of them. And he sent me the info that the people had sent or that was in the post, about Liz, and it's funny. He sent me like for Liz like the approach and the grip and wrestling style and what kind of wedging she would do and submission. So things like for Liz, the character, it was like I will let her submit easily, but will fight to my breaking point before I submit.
Yeah.
And Serena, similar but different stuff. Serena's like easily takes her prisoners as soon as she knows she's winning, the fight is over. So it's like, how do you balance both of those? All he had written before, and I can share a bunch of this too with viewers in whatever form you want. He shared a very brief intro, just setting up the scenery, and his part ends where he's like, he mentions Serena and Liz, formerly clad in their green and black undies, respectively, reenact much of the same festivity that the previous fighters had. That's all he had. So I wrote like the rest pretty much, except for, I assume the whole fight and maybe if there was some ending bit, but basically everything after that would have been me, and that's like the second line, second paragraph, basically. Like that was all he wrote. So
Mm.
having to figure out, okay, how do I like have these approaches? Exactly what I was saying to you before about how do you balance the characters. You probably want to get in their head, right? You don't want them to
Yeah.
just be the buxom blonde or whatever, as some of the descriptions are for the characters. Like you want to care about who wins,
Right.
um, as I know I would. You want them to both, and it goes back to like even like the Yu-Gi-Oh, like that original animated series where it's like you really care about all of them winning, and
Yeah.
you're like maybe you care more about Joey, which is what I did, than Yugi, even though his grandfather's trapped in the Shadow Realm. You don't really care. You're like I want Joey to win, but they give you enough for all of them, so you're really invested in it. So it was another challenge of this sort of format, like everybody has to have a compelling reason to win and they have to fight hard, but you have to be able to inch somebody to the top
Right.
without the other person looking like they suck. Which is, I guess, why a lot of Marvel like comics and fights they end in draws. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, but that person would win. It's like, yeah, but then everybody's gonna be upset, if the Hulk smashes Wolverine too badly. Stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just with that extra level of engagement.
Yeah, exactly. It's how you get engagement. It's like one of the ultimate questions, right, of this art form.
Right.
And for something like this, right, when there is so much information from the very beginning, it's like there's very complex mechanics. And the cool thing about the arena is you can kind of ignore all that, especially if you're not like a player, quote unquote, who's writing in with the information.
Right.
Like if you're a reader, you can just kind of gloss over that and be like, all right, I know these two people are fighting. I know generally what they look like, and I want to see who gets the hard wedgie. And that's part of its strength.
Yeah.
But at the same time, yeah, you can go deeper into it, and you can say, "Oh, I'm very interested in like how they spent gold this time around, or what do they do when they're off time? Like, I'm really interested in all that side content." And like the fact it has both is impressive because it's much easier to just do. Here's some fighters, they're gonna fight. There's no mechanics, you know.
Right.
And that's a sort of simple, straightforward approach to the sort of game. It's like you give me characters, I'll write them fighting. It's no, it's like there's steps. There's literally 6 stages to
Yeah.
combat. It's like that's crazy. Who needs
Yeah.
6 stages in combat? Real combat doesn't have 6 stages. It's just people fight. So it's a very impressive undertaking.
Yeah, and I think the 6 stages could be rebranded to like 6 aspects, something like that, because
Yeah,
then it's just 6 different components of it that can overlap and be simultaneous and all that, rather than stages, which
yeah,
just sound like
yeah.
they happen in succession.
Totally.
There were
Yeah,
there
it's
were
so much.
yeah, there were a good number of participants, including Random Person X or Dodo Bird with their OC
Yes.
Dana from High Velocity Superhero Wedgies, Username
Yes.
Guy with their OC Liz, Frog Boy with their OC Safria, Bison45 with their OC Catherine, Alpine with their OC Gisela, Chaser with their OC Camilla, Sir with their OC Serena, and me with Jen, for a total of 8 people, which was 2 more than I
That's
think
so
you
many.
originally wanted. But
I think you're right. That's so many people.
I think that works. 'Cause, then you have 4 matches.
Sure. Yeah.
I wonder.
Yeah.
I wonder.
Do you remember it was supposed to be just like that 4 matches, right? Sort of like. Do you remember if there was supposed to be a number of rounds and and then like a finalist round and so on and so forth? Do you remember
There,
like how many rounds there was supposed to be?
there was never any given time frame for how long it would go for,
Yeah.
but there was at least the second day happening. Like the second
Yeah.
day started,
Yeah.
so it was at least going to continue for a little bit longer. I was wondering like when are characters knocked out? Like, is it elimination, or they
Yeah.
just is it a certain number of rounds and then at the end wins versus losses are tallied up? Like, I don't know.
Yeah. That's a great question because that's probably what you want, right? When you have 8 characters to start, you gotta start getting rid of some of them because it's unwieldy to just
Right.
keep having them fight over and over again, and it kind of blends together.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
I mean, it's a fun interactive experiment. As a story, you certainly have to figure out like how many rounds are there gonna be, and you obviously need enough characters for that. And how do you eliminate one at a time, or do you eliminate in pairs somehow? I mean, the fun thing is there is a lot of potential and possibilities. You could have tag team fights, for
yeah,
example. You could have 3-on-3, right? 4-on-4.
yeah.
You could have eliminations that way. You could have different kinds of challenges, not just them fighting, but maybe they
Yes.
have to fight in some obstacle course, so they have to compete in some competition, and maybe one character is not as strong, has a disadvantage, but maybe it's not too bad, and or there's some other kinds of challenges like a race or something, and wedgies can happen during this race. So there's any number of ways you can sort of spin out the format of having people write in what they want to see happen, and then you make that happen. I mean, it's one of the easiest and most like satisfying ways to get content delivered to you, right? As a reader, it's like this is what I want to happen, and now someone wrote it in a fun story, so I didn't
Yeah.
have to. It feels like a need for that sort of personalized content. Uh, and this was really good for that, and a very early example of someone doing it. especially in a format like this, balancing characters and doing it in with an immediacy
You
that we
know,
don't often see, you know, and like and it's really happening in real time, unlike interactive stories that are crafted all in advance and it's like you make your choices and you get to see a character change, sure, but it's not like you're the one who's literally there from day one working with the writer and seeing stuff happen and getting surprised too, you know, because just because you say my character is going to be like this, it doesn't mean you're going to win every fight.
exactly.
And I think you kind of understand that going into it because
Yeah,
that's not the point. The point is to see a bunch of characters fight it out, you know.
yeah,
But yeah, who wins in this situation and why do they win is some tough questions to sort of answer. But really cool to see how like much goes into this sort of setup.
definitely. Yeah, and there's you could maybe have like a black market introduced, or like
Sure.
a shop for items, like
Yep.
boosts and things. Could do something like that. You could like go into debt to buy something, and then you have to like work in the slave quarters for free or something. I don't know, because that was
Sure.
something. That was something there, in the living quarters, I believe it was. There was the slave
Yeah.
quarters, that you could go to pay for time with one of them, or become or be one for a little bit of time and get paid for it, which was interesting.
Yeah.
And none of only one character actually did try to go there, but they didn't have the money, so
Oh.
we never quite found out what would have happened there.
Yeah. So many potentials, yeah.
Yep,
And of course, scope creep becomes an issue too with
exactly,
something like this. It's like
exactly.
you can leave it that closed as he does. He sets some limits, you know. Where he says there's things you can spend gold on, he lists them. He's not like you can spend it on anything you want. But at the same time, it's like, what if people are all going to these quarters? You know, like you have to do you write out that scene and do what the slave quarters look like, or do you somehow sum it up very briefly, or do you even have a very boring, almost like game like text that repeats if anyone goes there, and you just put it? Oh, X character has now got +1 to this because they went to the quarters, and that's it. It's like,
Yeah,
oh, but I want to see the wedgies, you know, I want to see the wedgie slave. I want to see the wedgie slave revolt from their masters, and you know, like, and it goes on and on and on. Where like, how big does the story get? How much of it takes away from like the core of it, which is them fighting. And certainly it goes on and on. If you go to the black market, do you meet a cool character there who wants to like bet on your fight? And if you throw your fight, you maybe get a big reward, but you
yeah,
obviously lose the fight. So do you make that kind of choice, right? You really can become, in Pony Pony X9's case, a DM who's giving players a lot of options, and then the players just have to write in what they want. But that's just so much to manage, right? If you have eight
hmm,
players, maybe all doing different stuff,
hmm,
or if they're doing the same stuff, do they do it simultaneously, or do you have to create something for them and say, okay, well you're waiting around doing nothing. One of the guards starts giving you a hard time. What do you do, or something like? Where do you go from there? Like
yeah,
if you keep it just to the fights, you know. I mean, it's so much to consider for anybody looking at like some kind of option or opportunity like this where they create the beginnings of the world and have people right into it. I mean, the point is really it might seem like an easy approach where you're like, oh, I just have to set some ground rules and then people are gonna make the content for me. No,
no,
no, people are always going to try and put it on to the other person. I know this from working on multiple community stories where I had some of the best writers, most helpful people, including Pony Pony X9, including Shell Melder. I mean, that's just how it goes naturally because you might not know how much you want to write, what you can write, or you really think this is something that they're going to do, they want to do, and they probably do. That's the thing. So don't
hmm,
expect if you say, okay, write some stuff, do this, that you're going to get everything you need or you're going to get enough that you're not going to be doing a ton of work. So it's a ton. And clearly when you have, as you pointed out, so many mechanics, so many
yes,
stages, gold, you know, places you can go, it's immense. It's such a
hmm,
big project, you know. And then yeah, when people don't write in, what do? You say this person does nothing. You skip them. It's like
Right.
what? Like okay, all right. I was kind of invested in that character. That's too bad. They didn't respond, so I had to say they skipped. Or do you write their thing anyway? I mean, it's so much.
Yeah. That's why I think it would work better if there was like D&D a set time
Yeah,
session for it, where
sure.
all the players were there
Yeah,
and they were responding.
I like that. I think that's a smart approach.
Yeah. Then it gets people excited because then it's happening once in a while instead
Yeah,
of whenever people feel like it.
yeah. It would be cool, in an ideal situation is if you had probably not 8 people, but yeah, a small group of players and you had the DM and then they recorded it and either live streamed it to the audience who are curious about the characters and want to see how it goes, or you post it for them after and then they can sort of keep a view of it. So it's like the arena, but yeah, just more interactive, immediate. It's happening in real time instead of here's what I want my character to do, and then a couple days later we get the story. It's like we get to tell it
Yeah.
um,
And I
in
wonder.
person with the DM probably helping. If it's a
Yeah.
fight thing and you're fighting, the DM probably has to rule who's gonna win and why, but you can both have a cool fight, I guess, until then. I mean, it's stuff they gotta work out. Like, how does it work? Like we said, but
Yeah.
it would be cool
And
to see
I
people in
feel
person
like
do it.
I feel like in that case you could rework um, the fatigues in a way to be sort of health bars.
Sure.
So then you could determine it that way, and like how much, like you just like roll d20s to figure out damage in that case.
Yeah,
Um,
that
I
makes sense.
I wonder if like I think it would get kind of boring after depending if because you have rivalry, you can create rivalries or social groups with other players. It might get boring after a while of watching just the same couple of characters fight each other. I
Yeah, it
mean,
would.
if you were to add in other modes, but I wonder if it I guess maybe just changing the like each day a different type of fighting happens. I
Yeah,
don't know, I'm thinking like it would make the most sense to like with a small group of people, like two, three, four.
yeah.
You have them in a party and like they have to survive against whatever the arena has to throw at them.
Yeah, yeah, I like it. I like not having to fight. Like I like a co-op sort
Right.
of game that feels more natural to me, and it's easier for the DM and for the players to not have to be like, okay, now I'm gonna fight you. I'm gonna have to fight
Exactly.
you, and it's like you're not friends in that. You're not like working together, so it
Right.
doesn't really lend itself well to like a sort of group fun atmosphere where it's like, oh, I have to beat your character. Oh, I lost again. Oh, I beat your character. It's like it's so competitive in that case.
Well, no.
Whereas why, yeah, obviously D&D party experiences are meant to be you coming closer together, you growing together. That's the fundamental part of it. So certainly, yeah, working together as a team, fighting against like adversaries in the arena, trying to win whatever prize is at the top of it.
Right.
Um, yeah, that would be a really cool approach. Absolutely. Fighting against each other only kind of gets you so far, unless it's a very limited, kind of thing. You really aren't friends. You're just trying to win some prize, and it's you have a
Yeah.
couple matches and then you win and then that's it,
Right.
limited series. Something like if you're in the arena fighting for your lives, you could you're a party together. You can stretch that out, You can keep going with it. Different challenges, different areas. Maybe you do have freedom to explore the city together, outside of the fights.
Yeah.
But you're tied to the arena because you're fighting slaves. You earn your freedom. Like that sort of stuff makes
Yeah.
sense to me more so than like, oh, well, now you gotta fight each other again.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, okay, we're bored. We're bored after the third fight. Like we lose that.
Yeah, you could have something like an exhibition match against the battle
Yeah,
mistress.
perfect. I love it.
It's like things like
Yeah,
that.
the Devil Dom.
One
Yeah,
thing, one
from the
thing,
deep south.
one thing to keep in mind about the version that exists right now is the social relationships of
Mm.
rivalries and social groups. So those can form. So like you can form a quote unquote party with a social group in this the base game.
Yeah. Yeah. It'd be cool if we got to see some of that play out. I mean, to me, it seemed like the potential for kind of danger territory because if someone gets isolated from this group, like how do they get into the social group and
Um,
like are they allowed in or is it too late? Does everybody gonna end up at one social group or like are they really gonna be these tough rivalries between each other? And that would be cool, I guess. The drama and the conflict of it would have been cool if three of the characters started like we're on one team, but then what if they have to fight each other? How does that go? Or if
yeah,
somehow you're able to maneuver the game so that the rivalry groups are fighting each other, and they're off on their own little adventures. Yeah, the whole idea of getting together, forming groups is cool, but in such like a 1v1 style format, it definitely opens up a lot of questions, but something to explore like for a broader game and a good mechanic I think to carry over.
yeah, definitely. Now, the first match was between myself and Bison 45. I was happily surprised to see I was the first, one of the first, um, and it was also really cool to see that not only had Jen given the first actual wedgie, that she also won. And
Yeah.
I'd seen Pony write other characters really well in the first community story, but this was on another level.
Mm.
I think he did a fantastic job writing her and all the characters and capturing them extremely well.
Yeah, that's high praise. It's cool because they're such blank slates in some ways.
Hmm.
Like, unless you have a character like Jen who has a story she comes from, and if you're a writer, you can read it and you can learn and you say, okay, I want to try and capture some of that. But a lot of times, like even in the copy you sent him originally and the stuff the other sent, it's like all I have is what they look like. I have to fill it in and maybe some ideas and hints from stuff like their approach, like what I read about Liz and Serena. Like those little details can maybe give you an idea of who they are, and you
Yeah.
gotta sort of capture that, and you gotta make them look cool. It seems to be a sort of secret of writing that like you don't have to worry too much about nailing a character who's like a fanfic character or someone who's like someone else's OC because the mind and the ear are gonna kind of trick themselves into seeing them as that character. It's a bit weird until you've written it and you've done it, but you don't have to like study every episode of a show and quote them exactly because obviously characters in shows or IPs or in a story they're gonna say different things, they're gonna do different things. But if you can get close to it,
Hmm.
it's pretty like flawless how much people are just gonna look at it and say, "Oh yeah, that's the character. I'll buy it. That's them." Um, I've seen that from writing a lot of fanfics of different universes, Marvel, and doing stuff like in the arena. I felt that. And it's okay. Yeah, I don't have to stress about making sure I like if I make a couple references. And if I get it close, obviously, the opposite of that is if someone obviously does something totally off, and
Yeah.
it can be really easy to do because you don't know the character, so you make some little mistake that totally like breaks it because like that character would never do that one thing, and you had them do it, so that breaks it. But if you're careful of that sort of thing and you're keeping in some of the elements of like the way they talk, some of their attitude. It's really not hard to sort of capture a lot of that and make it seem very convincing. Like this, I
Definitely.
could see this in an episode of their show, or I could see this in the next chapter of Fortunate Events. That sort of thing. And it's tricky to do though. And Pony X9 certainly, as you said, gifted writer, able to pull off a lot of that. Captures the crowd scene really well. Fighting in the arena. It feels like the arena and the crowd is like a character, which is what you want. You know.
Definitely.
So it's really cool.
Yeah. Now, sadly, the game ended after just the second day.
Yeah.
I would have loved to see where it went, especially with rivalries and friend groups forming. That would have been
Yeah.
incredible. I would have loved to see how they played out. And Pony also states at the beginning of the second day that the second match for all the fighters is the really important one, as a second win can mean great things and a second loss can mean really bad things. So this would have been the. I think this is when people could have started really questioning who's going to win.
Yeah. Could maybe get a feel for who the front runners are, who
Right.
are the underdogs. And then you gotta keep an eye on the underdogs. They're my favorite. The ones who should always win. And the ones who usually do. Um,
Yeah,
so
favorites
that
don't
would have been
usually win.
cool. Yeah, yeah, it's true. The thing I love maybe most of all about the story is just the different colors of the text and
Yeah.
things. I always thought that I remember, and I saw that again. It put a big smile on my face. So things like in the later chapter, like day one, early dawns, like text is all white, and
Yep.
he would describe what the weather is like, in the spectator
Yeah.
capacity, all with different colors. And it adds a sort of game-like element to it.
Yes.
It's kind of hard to describe, but when you see it, it's like this is different than the other stories, and it's a
Exactly.
small touch, but I guess the whole medium is the message thing. It's like it makes it look like a game, so it feels like a game. I
Yeah.
always like that. Or the characters with different colors. I'm pretty sure he keeps them color coded, and
Hmm.
they get their own color, so you can sort of associate them with that, and that's a fun touch as well to carry that over through descriptions and through their stats. Cool.
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
like that a lot.
It's that little visual pop that makes it
Yeah.
stand out.
Yeah, it's using the very limited like text form
Exactly.
um to his benefit, to make it like this is different, not just in the fact people are writing in, but even in this little way, right? Like there's a lot of ways this stands out from any other post on the board. It's
Absolutely.
the only story that tried this approach. It's the only one that even made some effort, in coloring the titles differently and the characters. Very impressive.
Yeah. So many options in Lucky Finish. Just don't even know about.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
Now, one of the things I love the most about this game is that it heavily focused on consequences. They could be good or bad depending on what happened, but there were
Mm.
consequences for just about every action you took, like increasing stats when you train or raising or lowering your reputation if you win or lose a match. There are tons more consequences for winning and losing, but look them up on the thread if you want the full list.
Yeah, yeah, I love that you pull that out, and I mean, it's true because right from the very beginning, like there is money and you can win money,
Hmm.
so it's right away like, oh wow, there's a reason to win, right? And when you're in a tournament arena setting, presumably there's going to be a great prize that you can win. So like it's built around consequences. The whole thing, there's going to be a loser, and it's not just that's it. The loser's gonna have to carry that loss into like the next game. So it's one of the only good sports
Yeah.
stories in the community, in that sense, where like the sport actually is the whole thing, and it's not just like oh sports, on to something else, as we've joked in
Yeah.
many other stories. Here it's like it's integral to the story, and the whole idea of sports and competition and a crowd and a winner and a loser, which are fundamental to sports. It's like it all matters here that there are
Yes.
prizes, that there are ways to sort of better yourself for the next match. And like so many of those sports mechanics do factor in and they do matter, which is very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Quick sidebar: Have you ever? Do you know Video Game Donkey?
Which one?
Video Game Donkey.
Donkey. I don't think I know the video game.
No, it's
Is it the
the
reviewer
YouTuber.
guy
The
who does like the
YouTuber.
Dark Souls? Yeah, okay. When
Yeah.
you said video game, I thought you meant the video game. Yeah, yeah, I've seen because I've seen the Dark Souls videos where
Yeah.
he's dunking his way through it.
Yeah.
Those are
Yeah.
hilarious. Yeah, I know him well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a video that he does on Sonic 06. And the way you said
Okay.
money made me think of the way he said it's so funny. He's like, with the
Yeah.
money. It's so funny.
Yeah,
Um,
I was probably inspired by him.
but
He's
anyway,
very funny videos and
yes,
very
he's the
funny
best.
way of playing through like
But
Dark Souls, for example,
yeah,
which is kind of how we all play at first,
but anyway,
or a lot,
um,
because the games are hard.
so when and where do you think this is set? At first, you think it's happening during ancient time with the
Yeah,
Romanesque arena, but there's also
yeah,
a loudspeaker that the battle mistress or the announcer uses to speak to the audience, and that's electricity
yeah,
and wiring and all kind of advanced technology. So,
yeah. And then, I mean, and all the people who submit are all like, "Well, we're in high school or I just graduated college," and it's like, what? You know? Some of them are a bit vaguer, but then it's like, oh, they're attending Emory University if you're Nufatora, you know? It's like,
yeah,
what's Emory University? Is that set in current day, like the Emory of their story, you know? Or if it's Duplica, who is the superhero, you know, and set up to be that same character who lives in a futuristic sort of city of Panda City with a lot of advanced technology. It's like this must exist maybe within some pocket universe where the modern day technologies exist if they
yeah,
need to, but it's like the world is kind of Romanesque, and
hmm
there's a giant gladiatorial arena, and there's guards who are dressed kind of like that. I think it's kind of the vibe we get of the guards. But then at the same time, there's any number of modern conveniences you might need. Because even the clothes you can choose to wear, I think, runs the gambit between like very traditional clothing. I mean, some of it's like meant to be, I guess, kind of Star Warsy, but then there's also stuff about carbon fibers, which feels futuristic, you know. And
yeah,
there's titanium banded combat bikini cut panties is one of the options. You could choose titanium studded too. It's like so that futuristic, you know. So my conclusion is it's some kind of pocket
yeah,
world where futuristic technology exists, but the arena itself looks like a Roman arena. It's how I picture it, you know?
yeah. I kind of see it as a steampunk world,
I like
a
it.
cyberpunk world,
Steampunk's
not
great.
steampunk, cyberpunk.
Yeah.
That's the overarching
Sure, sure, sure.
cyberpunk one.
Yeah.
But I have to agree with you that I think it is in a pocket dimension because it
Yeah.
defies any real way to pinpoint it
Sure.
because there's
Yeah, I think that's
contradictions.
deliberate.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that's deliberate. Even if not intentionally, like from the get go, my guess is, and this might be 100% off, my guess is maybe in Pony Pony X9's mind, it was started out kind of Roman fantasy, but then as soon as people start saying, my high school graduate characters in it, you're okay, well, now it has to be whatever. It has to exist outside of time and space kind of thing.
maybe.
And oh, and I mentioned a loudspeaker, you know. Okay, I gotta make sure I have something that we can listen to,
Yeah,
and on, you know.
yeah. As far as I can tell, I don't believe there's been any other interactive games in the community. We've had a few single player games, some scenarios, some graphic novels, but nothing like this.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about this game is that it's different because there's multiple people writing in and real time choosing what's going to happen. I mean, a good example of an interactive game is like Shadow Melder's The Atrium,
Hmm
which is in being developed into a longer game than what exists, but is a really really cool piece where you do get to choose uh, different aspects of. I think it's basically the first part is you're kind of trying to um, get through a small exchange with a character um, who may or may not wedgie you. You can maybe wedgie them. So you have that kind of game aspect. And then you have the kind of interactive games that are prevalent on writing.com in great number, mostly with a lot of fan fiction characters. And you can choose to sort of who you're going to play and if you're going to get wedgies or give wedgies. And usually they don't last super long and they're 3 or 4 or 5 chapters or parts. They're kind of short and then they die off and you're all depressed because you're super invested in making more choices and They say you can write your own, but you don't want to. You just want to keep reading them. So there are examples of interactive stories, and obviously like Survive the Day is a great example, which won tied for Story of the Year in 2015. Sleepwalk Today's Story, where you could play through and make a lot of choices and try to avoid getting wedgies. And that took you all across the city, basically, trying to avoid wedgies and running into all these different characters people know and love. So, yeah, there's examples of it, but no one's tried this sort of approach. And no one's tried it since or before or after. But it would be cool to get some kind of revisit to it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah. Which, speaking of, if it were to be done again, how do you think it should be handled? Should anything be changed?
Yeah, it's a tough question. Yeah, I would probably simplify the system, maybe, because there's a lot to manage in terms of how many combat stages there are. And even if you sort of play them out, but you don't have to, like, figure out. I sort of get it because it's like, what exactly is your character going to be doing? So all those stages is like making sure the writer you're working with or the person who's participating gives you everything you need. But I'll probably simplify it. Um, in terms have like fewer steps that people who are writing in need to do, and that also means you have less work as a writer creating this. I mean, if we keep it to Pony Pony X9, the same system where people create characters and then the writer of it will write the text, um, and then in the end you have a final winner after all these characters fight. I think that's okay. It would be cool though, of course, to add things like the different areas you can explore and see those. As you mentioned already, seeing things like the slave quarters, wedgie slaves play out, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um, it's hard to say because I mean, what we got is just a small taste of what the full game could have been and probably was going to become in terms of seeing these different areas, seeing the different fights. I mean, a lot of stuff we already hit on would be cool, different types of fights. Um, but keeping it like really close to Pony Pony's vision, probably just want a somewhat simpler system with money, probably less mechanics needed. I mean, we have like five stats: strength, agility, flexibility. Could you sum some of those up? Could agility and flexibility be one stat, or
Mm-hmm.
stamina and strength be one stat, and technique be its own, stuff like that. If you can make it a bit easier and a bit more accessible for
Yeah.
people to pick up the story anywhere without having to be like, oh, these stats have changed. What did I miss? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of mechanics. So maybe simplifying some of those uh, and by that probably simplifying how much people have to send you and how much you have to make sure you're keeping track of because that's a lot. So make less work for yourself is my advice for anyone who wants to try something like this.
Yeah, absolutely. If it should be more than one person running the game to prevent
Like that.
burnout
Yeah,
if
I
you're
can get
sticking
it.
with the same combat, but if you're going with if you're going to change the combat to be more, I think you should push as much as you can on the players, um,
Yeah.
just to make it easier on yourself.
Yeah, and as you saw, like Point X9, I helped him. I don't know if we would have got the Serena Liz fight. I'm sure we probably would have. I just helped it along. I maybe sped stuff up by getting something to him quickly, and but it's a
Yeah.
ton of work. Don't think you can create and manage this whole universe on your own, unless you have a lot of experience and practice and patience to do it. Because writing a wedgie story is hard enough, right? As any of us who've done it knows. So then trying to manage multiple characters and fights and who's gonna fight who and all the stuff they're doing outside the fights, it's a massive amount of work. And it's not just a thing of like, oh, it's gonna take a while, but I'll get there. It's like people are gonna be waiting
Hmm.
for the content, and sure they can be patient, but at the same time, like the expectation for something like this is it's gonna be kind of immediate. It's gonna be something they can read and enjoy and see what happens. Especially now in the age of like the internet and things being so quick, it's like people, I don't think, I were them, want to wait around after I make this character like a month to see what happens. You're gonna lose
Yeah.
interest, or you're just sure. There's me, of course. You gotta be like, oh, people, if they get a chance to be in this and make a character, they'll be patient, they'll wait, and I agree. I'm sure most people would be like, that's fine, but at the same time, certainly, I feel like you're gonna feel the pressure to deliver quickly, and in my experience, that kind of pressure doesn't lead to great bouts of, oh, now the story's done and I've written it. Usually just leads to procrastination and stress,
Yeah.
and not very great productivity. But maybe you thrive under those conditions of stress and being pressured and feeling like people are waiting for you. If so, by all means, do it all your own, and do it whatever.
Yeah. Um, that's really why I think it would be best to translate this into a D&D module, because then you can
Yeah,
have
I
the
like that.
combat be turn-based, and you don't have to worry about all that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's manageable. Players are working together to create the scene and the combat, and ideally, like you said, it's no longer like in that case you lean into the whole D&D setting of having them work together, and it's not like we have to fight each other. We're fighting the enemies that the arena puts forth,
Right.
which is a very powerful arc, and it's a great place to set up any game, right? You're
Mhm.
all together, locked in this arena, and you have to work together, whether you know each other before or not. It's a great, great setup for a lot of fun adventures and content. So very easily sort of expanded out into a module that players can play, and
Yeah.
it's replayable, because you can create any number of obstacles in the module, and then you also, of course, leave it open for a DM to create their own threats. Maybe there's some old rivals of the characters who find their way into the arena to fight, or there's the leader of the arena is corrupt, and they're dealing with them as the main mission, so on and so on and so on. So,
Yeah.
so much beautiful potential.
Absolutely. One thing after going back through, I can see that would be good is letting players know what effect their actions will have. Like
Mm,
at some points where characters work out, seeing if that stat will be raised temporarily or permanently, and if it'll give you fatigue, so you can plan
yeah.
better. There's multiple times where it was kind of murky what would actually happen if I did the thing I was gonna do.
Yeah. And like you mentioned, like, do those changes, are they permanent or something? Do I always have
Exactly.
this stat? And things like that. It's like if you lay that all out in the rules, and it's like I get a permanent stat boost, like you would think everybody naturally would want to do that same thing. And it's kind of like, how does anyone win if they're all totally balanced in the fight? You know, Stuff like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I don't know. Um, I mean, it sounds like depending on what items were available in the shop, you might have been able to buy. You might have been able to like work for a bunch of gold and then buy the best items, and then you'd be good for a while to catch up to
Yeah.
everybody else, and then beat everybody.
Sure. Yeah. If you get some secret magical weapon, you're just metagaming your way through. I grab the sword of always winning, and it gives permanent wedgies, and I win the fight. So,
Well, I mean,
yeah, there's stuff like that you have to balance, and
yeah,
figure out how does
it,
it
it,
work. If you get a weapon, because you want to fight, you have gold, right? That gives you an advantage for the next fight. And sure, there's a clever and complex system in place to be like, well, if you don't win the fight, you can make money by being a wedgie slave. But wouldn't that also have a consequence of affecting your wedgie fatigue for the fight,
yeah,
right? Say you have the money, you buy the same gear, you'd be slightly more fatigued because you had to take wedgies or something, you
yeah,
know? So it's a lot of balancing, and it feels like as is there's maybe a way to win and not come back, if you know what I mean. Like games sometimes, there's the RNG factor which you mentioned, which doesn't really exist in the arena in this form. But if in like a module, certainly you could have the dice rolls, the D20s that determine a lot, and that can be what means like someone wins or loses. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it would increase their wedgie tolerance, though.
That's a good point. Yeah, something
So
like that gets increased. So then maybe it does balance out.
yeah.
Yeah. You know how complex the game can get, you know,
Exactly.
to try and work this out, especially if you're like in your own bubble as the writer. It's like even if you lay this all out, it's like, but what if I am not sure on all my mechanics I just made, you know, or
Yeah.
if there's some if the players as players often have a talent of doing, they find some exception to a rule or there's a way to interpret the rules that makes sense when you read them, but like isn't what you thought of it. It's oh man, the tolerance is improved, but so is their fatigue. Is that a zero sum game or is
Yeah.
there some one of them stronger? You know, like does tolerance outweigh? And it goes on and on and on and on. You know.
Oh yeah. Yeah. There's all kinds of factors to consider. It's
Yeah.
I don't know how you
Yeah.
go about it. It's tough.
Exactly
You have
right.
to
If you
streamline.
stick to yeah, exactly. Streamline. If you stick to like an existing system, like a D&D or something, and try to apply some of those existing rules and standards, and just take some of I don't know, even the setting of the arena and some of the elements of it, you know, but really just change a lot of it and
Yeah.
not take much of what Pony Pony created. You have something totally different but maybe something I don't know more manageable. Obviously, it's possible to turn Arena itself into a module, and that should probably be the goal if you're going off of it. But it would take a lot of work to make something obviously balanced, you know, because you're making a whole game that people
Right.
can play and play over and over again. So it's yeah, unfortunately not as easy as just saying, oh, it's a module now we can
No.
play it. It's like, is it? What
But
about the gold and the wedgie slaves? You know,
you
so
know,
on and so.
this I'm thinking of a way that would it would be a lot of work in the front end, but once you get past it, then it would make it very efficient and probably pretty not too bad to run by yourself. Is making it more
Yeah,
like an actual game and creating formulas that would determine, like based on a die roll or something,
sure.
what the thing that you're doing increases, how much it increases, how much it
Totally.
decreases, or things like that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, no, with any sort of system like this, it's going to be all that work in the beginning so that players can understand it easily and any of them can pick it up and you can say, here's my module and hand it out to the community, so to speak. And anyone can pick it up and play it. And then they'll run into those situations of like, okay, I lost the fight. I don't get the gold. What do I do to make sure I don't just get steamrolled in the next fight while my
Right.
opponent is getting better gear and stuff? So I like that whole idea of keeping it close to the arena in some ways. I mean, you could even have it like you're fighting against the enemies of the arena. If you all roll bad, you don't die like in a classic D&D thing, but you do lose, so you don't get the rewards. So you have to do other things to sort of keep yourself in the running. Or maybe if you do lose enough times, you lose 3 times or something, because 3 is a magic number. Maybe you get eliminated, quote unquote. Maybe that means your party dies and you have to start over with a new party or something. So I mean that's a maybe cool mechanic way to go about some elements. And if you lose, then yeah, you have to do things like become a slave, maybe, or you do other
Yeah.
stuff. You go out into town and you find a secret potion that gives you a boost, but it also has a consequence to it, you know. Or you make a pact with a devil, you know, and get powers, but it's you lose your soul, you know, so on, so on, so on, so on. So you
I
have a lot of potentials.
I have an idea that to perhaps prevent steamrolls that might also wildly increase them. Handicaps.
Cool.
If a player could maybe buy or rent a handicap for a match, if to like increase, like if they win they increase the amount of gold they get, or they get like a stat boost or something like
Mm,
that, or their one of their
yeah,
tolerance levels is raised higher, one of their fatigue levels is raised lower, something like that.
yeah.
I don't know.
That's cool. I like that. Yeah, I think that's good.
That
Like
might be a
whether
good way
you're
to balance
fighting
it.
against each other or against like an enemy of the arena, Yeah, it's a cool idea. You can gamble and say, all right, I'm winning, but or I won my last match and I have an advantage, but going into this next one, I can take a handicap. I have to fight unarmed or something, and if I win still, and which I probably will, because I'm riding the high of the last win, I get more money or something. If I
Exactly.
lose, it sucks, But so
Yeah.
that's maybe a good way to balance it. You're right. If you introduce that kind of system, you get a good bonus for fighting with a handicap. I
Exactly.
like that. And then
Yeah.
people will probably be tempted to take that, and good
Yeah.
chance they do lose because they have the handicap. So it
Right.
does even it out a little bit. Yeah, I like that. That's a really good idea.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there would also be consequences for losing with the handicap,
Yeah,
more than just normal.
yeah, that
So it
makes
would be a
sense.
risk.
Yeah, that's cool. I like that. And it works like if you do tweak it, so it's like you are a party and you're fighting against NPC enemies of the arena. It's like if you lost last game, the enemies are gonna take a handicap. So like they're gonna try and win, and maybe they still do because of the rolls and stuff. But if they lose, yeah, they're gonna be in rough shape, and you're gonna
Yeah.
be able to bounce back from that as the player characters
Yeah.
kind of thing. Yeah, it's a good way to bounce it. See how fun and deep the mechanics of this can go. It's a
Exactly.
lot. That's why these D&D books are like 200 pages. For the player's handbook and stuff. There's
Yeah.
so much to
Yeah. That's
go
why.
into
That's
it.
why it's essentially a requirement to have your handbook with you when you go to a session.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, exactly. And you probably don't want to make something that's 200 pages. I mean, even just looking at what we have in the arena, it's like a post or two posts long, with the goal and things. And it's still a lot to take in, when
Yeah.
we're here for the wedges,
And a lot of them
because
aren't
that's the
really fully
thing.
described.
Yeah, exactly. So you'd have to make it clear enough that people could play it and people can understand it and that
Yeah.
they feel like it lends itself to wedgies. It's got
Potentially
to be
write
wedgie
examples.
focused. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. All
Could
kinds
be
of
a
stuff.
ton of work.
Oh yeah.
Ton of work
It would be.
for something maybe no one plays in the end.
Yeah.
That's the fear.
I don't know. I mean, I've made a game before, so
Yeah,
I have
so you
a
get it
little bit of expertise in it. So
for
maybe
sure.
maybe a couple of us should take up that challenge and turn it into one.
Nice.
All right.
If you do, yeah, you could launch a
Yeah.
Patreon. You could get a fan base.
Or just
I mean, Jackery Jack could help you. He's made
yeah.
a D&D module with
Hmm.
wedgies
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
others not for wedgies. So he's probably the go-to.
Yeah.
You can create an Avengers team for this.
Or just like have a Discord group and we play it occasionally.
Sure.
Um. Very nice. Is there anything else you'd like to discuss?
No, this was great. I apologize for all my rambling, but this was
Um,
super exciting to chat about this old gem.
yeah, absolutely. I always enjoy talking about these older stories, and yeah, this is an especially fun one because it's so different. Well,
Yeah. And maybe we do get you writing your own module game that we all get
maybe,
to play one day.
maybe, maybe.
I'll take
I
that.
think
I'll
I would
take a maybe.
translate. I think I'd try to translate Arena into one
Yeah.
before making my own.
Sounds good. That's totally yeah, that would be great. That's what I want to see.
Yeah, it would be kind of like the test drive, if you will. So
Yeah.
maybe I could
Absolutely.
work out all the kinks with this with the arena, and then really take away some good lessons to create the one that I really want to make if I do.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. Slightly less of a lift for you. You take some of the mechanics that exist and
Potentially.
re-listen to this episode and hear what you said, and you have a good base
Yeah,
for a
definitely.
game.
Is there anything you'd like to promote?
No, I was gonna say go check out Pony Pony X9
Nice.
48 carat on DA. Star Strider is an awesome story that I think everybody should read as well as their other works. The previous episode we did on them and the heist and the arena. Go check it out, and I would encourage people to try as much work as it is. Some kind of wedgie games, even if it's short, interactive stories like the little few I've been able to finish, which have been like you get one choice. You're
Yeah.
lucky you get that many kind of thing. But they're massively popular. Indoor Stereos has shown that with the few he's posted that have blown up. Um, they're very fun to do. Although a ton of work, just be warned. But very fun, and gamifying content is a big trend and the next evolution for us. So I want to see more of it.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Check all of that out. Well, there you have it. Another fantastic conversation with Hans Gutherson in the bag. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you again, my best friend, for having me on. It's the best.
Yeah, of course, of course. Now, if there's anything that you'd like to hear me discuss, or if you'd like to come on for an episode, leave a comment or send me a message on DeviantArt or Lucky Fetish as New Fedora. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode of Best Book Club.